Okay, it's 12 o'clock. I think we'll get going. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the January Planning Lunches at Noon webinar. It's called the Trends in Housing Permitting and Innovative Zoning, also known as the Housing Update. Thank you all for joining us today. My name is Ken Gallager. I am a principal planner in the Office of Planning and Development at the New Hampshire Department of Business and Economic Affairs. And I am joined today by Bart McDonough, the Director of Planning and Community Development for the town of Newmarket. So we are going to start, we have two presentations basically. We're going to start with an update on New Hampshire's housing supply as of 2025, and that's based on building permits issued by cities and towns in 2024. And then move to a closer look at a single town, the town of Newmarket, and its efforts to address its housing needs. So let's go ahead. While you're attending this, this is just a reminder. I'm sure most of you know how to do this, how to use the Microsoft Teams webinar controls. If you have a question, please put those in the chat, and we will do our best to answer them either during the webinar or at the end. And so let's go ahead and get started. All right, I'm going to do the first presentation, New Hampshire's housing supply, current estimates and trends as of 2025. This is basically our annual report on the status of the state's housing supply. We did a similar one last year. As we get going, I want to give you some background on how this housing report has come into existence. It's actually a byproduct of our office's mandate to do annual population estimates of every municipality in the state. That's RSA 78A 25. It directs us to estimate annually the resident population for all cities and towns as of July 1st of the preceding year. In order to produce these estimates, we rely on two inputs for our data: people living in group quarters, such as nursing homes or college housing or prisons, for example, and then people living in households. To get that second component, which is the households, therefore the housing units, we conduct an annual survey of all municipalities who report to us the change in the number of dwelling units in their communities. To do the estimates, we are then able to apply some factors, such as persons per housing unit, and percent of units which are occupied year-round, to produce our population estimates. Because of this mandate, we take it seriously. We survey every single community in the state, so we achieve 100% coverage every year. The downside of that is that it has an effect on the timeliness of our data. We collect the building permit data for 2024. We usually get that so that we're able to produce the estimates as of July 1st of the following year. And now at the end of this year, we have everything compiled and we're able to make our conclusions from what we've seen. For our population estimates, we assume a 6-month window from when a building permit is issued to when construction is completed, hence the July 1st, meeting the July 1st requirement. Just so you know, we do have a mechanism to remove units that were permitted but were not built by asking communities to report whether any permits have expired. What that means is if some have expired, we then do have to go back and make corrections to the previous year's numbers before we move forward. So far, they've been fairly negligible, but there is that caveat to how our data is collected and produced. And I'm going to put out in front of you right now the limitations of this survey. So remember, this was designed to support our annual population estimates. And in order to get that comprehensive coverage for the entire state, the data collected focuses on the number of households per structure and not on other elements of a more comprehensive housing survey. So we don't gather assessed value. We don't gather attributes such as the size or the materials, that sort of thing. A lot of people keep asking, when are we going to do ADUs? At the moment, we still do not. We are working on how we can figure out how to make that part of our survey that will continue making the numbers that we get be comprehensive. Also, we don't collect addresses, so we are only getting the total numbers of units permitted per municipality. Just remember, as I said earlier, not all permitted units might be built. Some do expire. Because it is complete municipal coverage, it is therefore a little bit less timely than you might see from other sources which use other methods. So here we go. We'll go ahead and start looking at the results. Here's a graph of the statewide numbers. If you've seen our reports, this shaped graph sort of has been showing up on the front page of our reports for a long time. The large peaking there 20-some years ago, number of units permitted per year, and then a big drop with the recession down to 2011, and then a gradual rise. And what you're seeing is a little bit of volatility coming on at the end here. Last year, we had to report that there was a drop in the total number of units permitted. This year, in 2024/25, we did have a rebound. So we're now up to 5,822 units permitted in 24 and built in 25. And that's the most since 2006. And the total number of units added since 2020 is over 25,600. That is still, however, under the target that was set for 2025 in New Hampshire Housing's statewide housing needs assessment. It's more than 3/4, 78.5%. So here's how the numbers break out based on the type of housing units. So of those 5,822 units, we saw in 24 a slight decrease in the number of single-family homes permitted. It was 73 fewer. And we saw a large increase in the number of multifamily units permitted, more than 1,000 more. And a large percentage of those were in the large project category, 5+ units per building. Almost 2,500 units were in that category. The 62.4% of all units being multifamily, that's the highest we have ever seen in doing this survey in a year, at least since I've been doing them. And you can see, just for comparison, the rates in the 3 previous years. So single family was 35.6, and it was higher in previous years. Multifamily was more or less lower in previous years. Manufactured tends to stay fairly even. You can look at that trend a little better. Yeah, here we go with just graphing it out. I found it interesting to notice that the number of single-family units permitted has actually decreased every year since 2020. The multifamily units are more volatile, but as you can see, there's an overall rise going there. It first surpassed single-family in 2022. And then the manufactured housing, it's always been kind of low in recent years, and we're continuing to see a gradual decline in the number of units permitted. Okay, start looking at the patterns in the permitting. The first thing to report is an observation that we've noticed for a couple years now, where a large portion of the permitting occurring is in a relatively small number of communities in the state. This most recent year, there were 12 communities representing 32% of the state population, however, permitting 49% of the total housing units. That's comparable to the previous year, 2023. 11 communities at that point, which were 28% of the population, permitted 50% of the total housing units. Another thing to notice is that of those 12 communities that I've listed on the slide here that permitted 100 or more units, 5 of those were not on the list last year. They had permitted fewer than 100. So again, that's sort of another example of you can see some volatility in the locations of housing growth based on where the large projects are going in. For example, Londonderry, second on the list in this most recent year, was at 372 units, but the previous year it was only 54. And some others weren't even on the highest list in previous years. Look at Somersworth, which only had 18 in the previous year. Derry with only 26. Brookline was kind of a surprise showing up, which only had 6 units total permitted in 2023. We've made a graph. This is sort of follows the same format that we've done in a few years, illustrating what I was mentioning about the concentration of permitting in a relatively small number of the towns in the state. If you look at the graph, the light green bars are the populations of the communities, and the dark green bars are the number of housing units permitted. So for instance, if you see that on the left side of the graph, the light green bars are higher than the corresponding dark green bars, that means those are areas where the percentage of the housing units permitted is less than the percentage of the population in the state. And that changes as you get over to the right-hand side of the graph, especially to the farthest right, where the percentage of units permitted is quite a bit greater than the total percentage of those same communities in their population. Those are the top 12 communities that permitted the 100 units there on the right, which comprise 32% of the state population, but 49% of the units. So let's look at the geographic distribution of this. Here's the map for the state. Number of housing units per municipality. Darkest shades are the greatest numbers of new units. Also, the little red boundary lines, those are the 13 cities in the state. So you can see some of the cities are in the large numbers of new units and some of them are not. So there were also some towns that were in the mix of the most permits issued. This time around, Londonderry, Derry, Litchfield, and Brookline, for instance. And then we've listed also on the map the 12 communities which permitted more than 100 housing units. Looking at it by county, you can see here that the most housing growth, shown by the size of the pie, continues to be in the 4 southeastern counties, Hillsborough, Rockingham, Strafford, and Merrimack, with Grafton County rounding out the top 5. The other thing to notice is how in each of those 5 counties, there were more multi-unit structures permitted. Those are the green portions of the pie. Each of the other 5 counties, which had far fewer total units, instead had more single unit structures permitted. Those are the purple parts of the pie. That, in fact, those made up more than 3/4 of the total in most of those counties: Coos, Carroll, Sullivan, and Cheshire. So we're looking at differences by county here, sort of how they compare to one another. In this most recent year, Rockingham issued 507 single-family permits, then down through Hillsborough and Carroll and Grafton down at 230. Those are the most units permitted in those by county. It's almost the same pattern as in previous years, though Grafton and Carroll are switched. And also you can also see that the total number of units, single-family units permitted, is lower in each of those counties. For multifamily units, again, the pattern of counties holds continues to hold from previous years: Hillsborough, Rockingham, Strafford, and then Grafton. with more variation. There were actually slightly fewer multifamily units permitted in Hillsborough than the previous year, but large gains in Rockingham and Stratford, and a fairly significant gain in Grafton as well. There were 5 counties, and this was shown on the map, where there were more permits for multifamily than single family. In the previous year, there were only 2 counties where that was the case. Also, there were 5 counties, slightly different number, which had their permits numbers for multifamily rise over the previous year. And 5 additional counties, Carroll, Cheshire, Merrimack, Stratford, and Sullivan, did have more single-family permits than in the previous year. Listing here the number of towns and cities which permitted the most units in 2024. Look again at single family. You'll see the numbers are all a little bit lower than for the towns and cities in the previous years. Portsmouth was at 110 in the previous year. Epping was the highest at 76 this past year. Most multifamily units permitted. We actually, the largest in the 2 years ago was Manchester, over 600, but most of the other communities. And so they sort of naturally had a smaller amount this year. This year, Dover was the largest with 456 multifamily units permitted. And we also look at the greatest percentage increase in total housing stock. Considering the fact that Brookline is a rather small town, that had by far the largest increase with their 111 units that in 2024 permitted, which is a rather astounding amount of growth. Litchfield and Londonderry and Dover were also over 3%. And then there were actually 9 additional towns and cities which had a greater than 2% increase in their total housing stock. Okay, we are keeping track of how the numbers are going by Regional Planning Commission, because this is sort of a check basically on how we're doing compared to what was being forecast by the New Hampshire Housing's report on the housing needs assessment in order to reach a balanced market by 2040. So as of 2025, assuming that all the units permitted in 24 were constructed, the housing supply totally would be 664,039 units, which is 25,688 more than what was shown at the 2020 census. But that's less than what the statewide housing needs assessment forecasted would need to be added in order to make that goal by 2040. We're at 78.5% of that sort of intermediate goal for 2025. However, be aware, please, also that once again, this is assuming that the housing units that are permitted are constructed in the following year. So that it'll be probably a little bit lower than that, not much, depending on any difficulties that might occur obtaining financing, or unfavorable labor or materials costs, shortages, other reasons. And the other thing to remember is that we are just looking at the number of housing units that have been permitted to be built. And if you look statewide, there are certain regions of the state where a higher percentage of those units that are built are not for year-round housing, but rather for seasonal or vacation rental type housing. So we haven't distinguished we don't have a way of distinguishing in our assessment as to which buildings that are permitted are going to be used for year-round housing or not. One thing that one can do is to look at the number of vacant, as in short-term rental or vacation homes, as tallied by the U.S. Census back in 2020. Okay. Following up on that table, we do include in the report a map of each planning region shaded out with the number of units permitted. And so there's a link, there will be a link to this report in the slides that you will be able to download. This is an example for the Central New Hampshire Regional Planning Commission. One thing to notice with the maps is that they don't all use the exact same range. You'll notice there's an odd number, sort of oddball ranges on there, which are basically tracking exactly the number of units. So 147 was the most, and 87 was the next most. Those are the two of the towns there in the region that issued that number of permits. So it'll vary from region to region, but it'll give you a sense of the distribution. I do want to bring up the Housing Champion program, which is run out of our office. In 2025, there were 10 new municipalities were designated as housing champions. So the total in the state is now 28. Any community can apply for designation by documenting that they have zoning and land use regulations which promote workforce housing, that they train members of their land use boards on appropriate procedures and on the laws that apply to board members, or that they implement sewer and water infrastructure improvements, or implementing public transportation and walkability infrastructure, such as sidewalks. When they get designated as champions, that makes them eligible for funding that supports housing production and housing infrastructure. And this slide has a link to the Housing Champion Program website. Just thought I would list those 28 communities, what they did in 2024. However, the 10 that were most recently designated were not yet housing champions at that point. Nevertheless, they are now, and those are the numbers from this past year that they permitted and therefore allowed to be built. So that's basically the gist of the presentation. Just the takeaways. The state has bounced back from a dip in the housing units that was occurred in 2023, and we are now seeing this most recent one was the highest number of units permitted since 2006. There's the number of units that we added, 25,688. The state is in a multi-year trend of number of multifamily units permitted increasing while the number of single-family units permitted is decreasing. And we've also seen a multi-year trend where a smaller number of communities, mainly cities and large towns, account for a majority of housing units permitted. And just remember that this is still an estimate. We assume that all units were built by July 1st of last year, but we don't have any way really statewide of collecting certificates of occupancy, for instance, from every single town. So we have to assume we can only revise that number if the town then tells us later that that building permit has expired. So with that, I think, yep, we're going to move it. I think we can probably answer a couple questions before we move on. Let me look at the chat and see what people have been asking.
And there's two
okay.
questions. One is just a statement from Carrie,
yep.
Who says that we currently do report ADUs as a new dwelling unit.
Yes, thank you. That's a good comment. There are many towns and cities, but by no means a majority, probably a quarter of them, maybe not even that many, that do report ADUs. So that's really helpful. And when we find a way to address that in our, hopefully the next cycle of sending out the report, that will be a good base to start from.
Another question is, why is there a difference of building permits from the census? Census reported 4,965 total.
Yeah, that's a good question. We have different methods for collecting that information. Census relies on a sample. They do imputations. They don't call everybody. They basically, they have a curve that they fit their numbers to. And so they're quicker, but I think we have the data here is what the towns are actually reporting, every single town.
And yeah, go ahead.
Okay, and I'm seeing the last question. This is a great question as well. If a municipality has underreported building permit activity in the previous year, can they submit updated information? The answer is definitely. We send out our surveys at the beginning of April, and there are instructions on the survey. You are actually requested to make any corrections if you are aware of any. I had not encountered that until last year when actually the city of Concord contacted us, and we were sort of wondering because the numbers seemed kind of low from the previous year, and they came back and said, "Oh, we didn't quite understand what you were asking for," and sent in all of the projects. I won't get into more detail than that, but so that's a way for us to get that information before we actually publish our population estimates. So please, yes, if you happen to be the person who gets your dwelling unit survey when it comes out, take a look at the numbers that we do report the numbers from the previous years as part of that form. And if you think that's wrong, then just go ahead and make those changes and send those back to us. Okay. And I think I have one more question. It says, do we know if there's any analysis being done on the number of municipalities that are currently compliant with RSA 674-59 that allow for reasonable opportunities for workforce housing? I do not know the answer to that. I would say there's not such an analysis being done here in our office at this point. There may be others who might be doing that. Okay. I guess I'm going to take this one last question. Rhode Island has a statewide permitting system. Can something like that be implemented in New Hampshire? Maybe. I'm going to have to say that I'll have to take a look at it, but also, that's something that would have to be, I think, require a lot more planning than would be just come from our office. And I guess that'll do it for me. Thank you all for your questions, and we will move on to our next presentation, Bart McDonough. So Bart, you can go ahead and take control.
Okay, I think I did it. Let's see. Yes, successful. Good afternoon, everyone. As Ken said, my name is Bart McDonough. I'm the Director of Planning and Community Development for the town of Newmarket. And today I'm going to present to you all what we've been doing for the past couple of years here in Newmarket and where we're going to go in the future. So just an overview of what the presentation will entail. We'll look over existing conditions, what Newmarket has done in the past 30 years, 35 years, just to give you some context of how we got here. And then we want to highlight our grant applications from the Housing Opportunity Grant Program, and which has helped us tremendously in achieving our housing needs. So for existing conditions, just gonna general overview of where is Newmarket, who's in Newmarket, and what type of housing that we have. So I am go right here. So just from people not familiar, Newmarket is in the western shores of the Great Bay in Rockingham County. We are technically under Stratford Regional Planning Commission, even though we're in Rockingham County. We're surrounded by Durham, Lee, Epping, and Newfields. We have routes 108 and 152 cutting through the town. And our major, area, we have a very, for this town of this size, we have a very urban area, if you will, in our downtown village area, which is, has the Lamprey River and Piscassic rivers surrounding it. So, as you may know, this is a little outdated, some of this American Community Survey census data, but this is what's in our current master plan. So Newmarket's around 9,400. We have a relatively young population here of 38 and a half years. Student population is, you know, it fluctuates between 1,000, under 1,000, but it's relatively stable. And then we have our income conditions right now from owner and renter standpoint. So from a housing context perspective, a majority still, we have single family majority, but we do have a lot of multi-unit buildings, you know, comprising around 35–40% of our housing stock is multifamily, so about 3+ units within a building. So, you know, a lot of that's concentrated in our downtown area, so it goes back to that density, you know, significant density in the downtown. Over the past couple of years, we've added, you know, we're achieving our housing needs assessment goals of 756 units by 2040. It's primarily 2 buildings that we recently permitted, and actually they have their COs now. So one's a market rate around 41 units, and then the other one's elderly affordable 32-unit building. And then we also are seeing an uptick in accessory dwelling units, which is great. I can speak to that in a moment, how we got there. And then again, we are looking at around 756 units that we need to build here in Newmarket, and around 500 units that will be owned and occupied, and around 250 for rentals. So we are under that right now, you know, over the past couple of years, but you know, we're looking to change that and get back on track. So again, I think it's really important to understand, you know, how we got here, this current state here in Newmarket, and all the efforts that have been made to, you know, put Newmarket in a good position. So it's really important to understand that, to know where we're going in the future as well. So around the late 80s, 90s, Newmarket's downtown was, you know, like a manufacturing town. It was, you know, seeing hard times, and the town came together to really try to figure out how to revitalize it. The first piece of that was the Rivermore Landing development. It's where Timberland used to make their boots. So if you're familiar with Newmarket, it's the brick building there in downtown. And that was converted into around 77 units. That kind of really kick-started it. And a really important player in the redevelopment of Newmarket was the Community Development Corporation. So I know a lot of municipalities may not have this entity, but it has served Newmarket really well to see that redevelopment. So they were able to purchase the whole complex, you know, besides the Rivermore piece. And they were basically looking to, you know, try to find someone to, you know, redevelop it. There was questions of tearing it down, but really they want to see it revitalized. And then the town stepped in as well, and this was in conjunction of, all right, we want to see our, you know, historic buildings revitalized, but also we may need to do something from a street perspective. So in addition to that, they created a TIF district to help for public improvements to, you know, to help with that redevelopment effort. So we entered the millennium, and there was again, the town stepped up again. The citizens, they formed a committee and really drove that discussion, did a lot of outreach, a lot of community engagement, and understanding, you know, what do we want in our public way, what do our sidewalks, what do we want the downtown to look like. And they finally came up with the design around 2000. But prior to that, Newmarket Community Development Corporation, they actually sold a section of the mill complex to Chimberg Developers, which is the Bryant Rocks, was on the western side of the Lamprey River. It's that big granite building, if people are familiar. So that kind of, you know, invigorated the redevelopment, and that was started construction. in the early 2000s. And then again, like I said, the Route 108 downtown area, the master plan was finished, and efforts were underway to start trying to finance that. And eventually they did get that completed in around 2010. What's really helped all this effort is the water and sewer infrastructure. Can't emphasize this enough. There's a combination of things that got Newmarket to where it is today. Some of it mandated, some of it wanted by the community, but a lot of resources, effort have been put into the water and sewer infrastructure and continue to be to this day. That's what really allows us to have the density, unlock the density here in downtown Newmarket. And we'll support future densities as well. But that really started in the early 2000s, maybe in the 90s as well, based on the mandates from the federal government. And then around 2006, policies changed at the state level. We had 79E become available, and Newmarket took advantage of that. And to support the 79E as well, they looked at the mill district, mill areas, and they created a new zoning language to be more attractive, be more practicable, to actually make something happen in those properties. And then, around before 2010, NCDC, they wanted to find another partner. So they went out to, search for another partner to finish the rest of the mills. And they ended up going with Jimberg Developers again in 2009. So, having that consistency, a vision, and public support and state level support, all kind of came together at that moment. And then as a result of that, you got the mill buildings. So the Bryant Rock, which I talked about a little earlier, it's around 30-something units there, and there's some row housing as well. So, and then the main Chimberg development, the mills, we saw, you see here, over 100 residential units, live work units, 30,000 square feet commercial space, civic space, and then across the street where there used to be mill complexes, but they were demoed. We saw more commercial activities from a grocery store, brewery, what ended up being the restaurants and a coffee shop. And these commercial spaces are also right next to the library. So again, having that civic and commercial space together, really important. So you're starting to see the vibrancy come back. Start people coming, living here, supporting businesses. So the vision's coming together around this point in time. And then really from a long discussions, not only within Newmarket, but also with our neighbors, about the McAllen Dam. So this is the dam that is, in between the two mill complexes that was ended up being maintained and improved. So, there's advantages, disadvantages of having it, but Newmarket decided at the end to keep it and repair it. And from a vibrancy standpoint, I think it makes the area look great. And also from our partners at Fish and Game, working with them with the fish ladder there. So just different intersections. So I guess the whole point of all this is that this wasn't a quick fix. This was a lot of community discussions, a lot of effort to get to where Newmarket is today. And it's kind of, if there's a takeaway here from all this, is the importance of engaging with the community, creating a vision is really essential to get to where you want to be. So 2020, 2025, so I came in around 22. Before my time here, there was a gateway study here that identified different parts of town. One of them was around Durham, Newmarket line, the other one Newfields, Newmarket town lines. That's where 108 is, and then on 152 as you go towards Lee and Epping. There's another gateway. So the town is looking at other opportunities for growth or development. And then, so I'll get to the gateway. I'll circle back to that. But after that, when I came along, we amended our ADU ordinances. So before the state changed their ADUs, we had a similar pattern, whereas we allowed ADUs by right, detached or attached, internal conversion, attached, detached. It could be in non-conforming structures if they're grandfathered, and on all single-family lots, including manufacturing housing as well. So we wanted to make it as easy as possible for the ADUs to come online, just an option for folks. We changed our impact fee schedule to remove water and sewer from impact fees to system development charges. So the purpose of that was for flexibility to utilize those monies throughout the whole system, and instead of having a direct nexus between the development and the improvement. So again, it allows us to utilize our resources much more effectively. Around 23, we did our stormwater regulation amendments, updating those to make sure that any development that we have is just, it's more up to date to stormwater advances. So we found that is very important. And again, making sure our site plan subdivision regulations are relevant, flexible, and create predictability. And then, as I'll speak to a little bit, we did our zone. We passed some zoning amendments on form-based code, and then we're doing a comprehensive master plan update as well to help support all this. So that leads us to our HOP grants that we completed. We did in phase 1, and then what we currently are doing in phase 2. So in phase 1, it was 2 tracks. One was to update our housing chapter for the master plan, and then the other was to understand what people would want to see in their neighborhoods as it were to redevelop or as it was changed over time. My hypothesis going into this grant was that people want to see building patterns that are predictable and that fit into their neighborhood. And so I wanted to test that to see if that was the case. And in order to do that, we needed to reach out to folks that be affected by it. And the geography that we picked was the North Gateway. That was coming from that Gateway study. And that's along Route 1 away from the Durham town line. And then originally it was to the bridge of downtown, but then the planning board decided to extend it all the way down 108 till you come out of downtown on Exeter Road. So the scope changed a little bit through the process, but so that was kind of interesting moment in time. And then in addition to that, we want to make sure that the zoning worked for folks, that and if it didn't, then what can we do as a municipality to change that in order to achieve their goals? So how we did this, we had our lovely consultants from Stratford Regional Planning Commission, and then Ivy Van from Town Planning Urban Design. They were really essential in helping us facilitate discussions and developing these new regulations. So the process was great. So what we did is we had focus groups first. So we notified folks, through postcards, this is please come help us, help us really write the zoning. We want to hear from you. And how we did this was we had these playing cards, and they have different housing types on there. And then we created maps of the areas that we're thinking of changing the zoning. And then we invited all property owners to these focus groups was in that civic space in the mill building. So we took it outside town hall into a neutral space, and we basically had folks take the cards, and we asked them, which building types do you like, which you do not? And they sorted them out. We threw away the ones they didn't like, and we took the ones that they did and say, okay, where can you see this in your neighborhood? And so we had them interacting with it, kind of thinking about it, and, really, buying into the process, and, trying to understand, where do they want to go as a neighborhood, as a property owner. So, so we did that. We had probably 4 or 5 focus groups. Turnout was, like everything these days, not ideal, but we had probably over 100 participants, probably around like 120, and we probably notified a few thousand though. So that's something if there's anything challenge or knock on the process is, how do we get more folks to participate these days? But that's a larger issue in general. So we did that. We did this, and we compiled the data, and we found all the building types that people agreed upon. It was the most common ones, and then we developed 14 housing types, building types, for the new zoning recommendations. So that was interesting. So in July 24, we got a report from Ivy, and then the plan board took over, and they spent about 9 months going through it, changing it. And what they ended up doing was there was 2 districts. One was called Village Corridor, and then the other one was, T4, but right now we're using Village Residential. And they just want to focus on that main corridor first before branching out to the other areas of town where the zoning district would be affected, because there's a lot more context, a lot more public engagement needed in order to make sure that the plan board gets it right before they make any recommendations to town council. And just as a side note, we're a council system, so we don't have to wait for town meeting or anything for any zoning changes. So it's another benefit in this community. And then so again, basically the plan board, they did a couple things. They kept they kept all the building types. They agreed upon that, but what they did was they split the zoning district into 3 sub-districts and changed the dimensional controls a little bit for each one, each district. But the main points of it was, relaxation, dimensional controls, special use permit or conditional use permit flexibility, and then really focusing, making sure that the developers or people developing their property are adhering to the building types, but with ability to have a little variance through that special permit process. But also for the larger developments, really focusing on placemaking and community, and what will this large development, how will it add value to that? Kind of, so basically what we did was build it around the community aspect. If you're gonna have a larger development, how will these people interact with each other, and besides just living in, individual units? So, and, building development around that. So I'm not sure if it's going to work, but that's what the direction that we went towards. So that's great. And then in this past June, town council, they passed the ordinance, and we haven't received any applications, but we are expecting 4 in the first half of this year. So stay tuned to that. And then throughout this next year and a half, we'll be working on that green area that you saw in the last slide, the T4 district. So we received another HOP grant, and essentially what we're doing is just continuing that process, but throughout the whole town. So instead of that downtown area, we're just going through neighborhood by neighborhood, asking, just collecting data and seeing if there's any opportunities to change the zoning and add, specific building types within those neighborhoods, because we really just want to make sure that we're meeting the needs of the community, and we want to create some predictability, not only for them, but also for people who want to come into our community and build here. And so again, from what we're doing right now, we're gonna we already did a first pass with the focus groups, and we're going to do a second focus group meeting this February to present some just basically present what we heard from them to see if we're on track. Yeah, that's basically it, what we're doing here in Newmarket. Yeah, I'm looking forward to the future, and I'm happy to take any questions that you all may have. Okay, let's see. Let's see.
Bart, we have
Yeah.
a couple questions.
Great.
The first one is from Jeff, and he's asking, what percentage of the population do you estimate was involved in the community discussions that you mentioned?
Yeah, great question. Not enough. That's why to kind of circle back to that, we also did a community-wide survey, so online survey, to try to reach out to as many people as possible. We only got, again, 100, 150 response. So, it's a small, that's the challenge. It's like, how do we get everyone heard and participate in this? And I'm open to suggestions. What we did is we sent a postcard to mailing addresses, everyone. And it's on our town website, newsletter, posters. We post in different businesses. So we try really hard. But again, civic participation is out a low. So, but doesn't mean that we're going to stop and continue to outreach, and hopefully we can figure out some new ways to create more engagement.
Okay, Nate, next question is, I'm assuming it's a question. Farmland, at what point will Newmarket be built out? Farmland protection, open space, wildlife protection. So I'm assuming if those would be used for building out as well.
Yeah, so kind of circle back to our vision sessions when we're doing our master plan update. The challenge is making sure that all of Newmarket's goals are being reached. So there's a lot of different aspects to that. So again, farmland, open space protection, wildlife. So we do have an updated open space plan. And, really we want to focus our development, redevelopment where our infrastructure is. So we don't want to, keep on subdividing where our open space, forest areas, wildlife areas are. So we're really cognizant of that and strategic on that. So, again, focus where development is appropriate and where it's not. Because the last thing we want is sprawl. I don't think anyone really wants that. That's kind of the challenge. One thing that's aside, what we're doing here in Newmarket, hopefully it will happen soon, but we're going to establish a long-range planning committee potentially to really focus in these larger scale discussions, but also make sure that our objectives and our master plans are being checked and are being met. So again, really making sure if there is any development, there's an entity, looking at these things, having these conversations, making sure that we're on track and not veering off the rails. So to answer your question, we're very aware of it, and we're very intentional of not harming those areas. And then I see another question. There seems to be a large number of housing type options in those playing cards. Can you give us examples of what they were? Yeah, so there was single family, ADUs, different type of ADUs, duplexes, triplexes, it's just the gamut. Cottage courts, let's see, large apartment buildings. So it really had, as many housing types as possible. So it wasn't geared towards one aspect or not. So we want to make sure that every option was available. And so we understood exactly what people were looking for, or people are comfortable with going into their neighborhood as their neighborhoods evolve. Yeah, if there's any more questions, yeah.
I don't see any more questions. If anyone has any more questions, we have a couple minutes if you would like to put them in the chat. And I guess if we don't see a question, we can wrap up.
Yeah, I guess as a final note, if anyone wants to reach out, please do. Happy to kind of discuss in further detail what those focus groups are, or you know, what we're doing here in Newmarket. So I appreciate your time listening to the presentation. So thank you.
And we want to thank everybody for participating. We will send out a follow-up email with the recording. Bart, there's another question. Oh, no, this is just, yeah, that's what I'm saying. We will send out the slides and the link to the recording in the follow-up email, and it will be posted on our website and on our YouTube channel. Thank you very much, everyone, for participating. Stay tuned for our next webinar in February.